Okay, so when you think about education, what comes to mind? Like, is it just sitting there taking notes, maybe feeling like, a teacher is just pouring information into your head, like filling a container?
Or is it maybe something more active, something that changes things?
Exactly. That second idea, that's much closer to what we're talking about today.
Are doing a deep dive into Paulo Freire.
Yes, this really incredible Brazilian educator, his ideas weren't just about tweaking how we teach, they were pretty radical. He basically wanted to connect literacy, learning itself, directly to liberation.
And his work wasn't just theory, right? It came straight out of the struggles he saw all around him in Brazil. That made his ideas super grounded, really impactful.
For sure. And we've got some great source notes for this, looking at his life story, the historical situation in Brazil, which is crucial, and then the real nuts and bolts of his teaching method and his key writings.
Yeah, so our mission really is to unpack these big concepts from Freire, like banking education versus his idea of liberatory education.
Right, and get into how his teaching actually worked in practice, and why these ideas, well, why they hit so hard back then, and why people are still talking about them, debating them today.
Okay, let's get into it.
So let's start with the man himself. Who was Paulo Freire? What kind of context shaped him?
Well, Paulo Regis Neves Freire, he was born in 1921 in Recife, Brazil. His family was middle class, but they really felt the impact of the Great Depression.
Ah,
And that early experience with poverty, it seems it really stuck with him. It sparked this lifelong focus on educating the poor. He actually got a law degree first.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but education quickly became his real passion. He worked in social services, places like SESI, the social service of industry in the 50s.
Right, Sesai. That must have been important.
Oh, absolutely pivotal. It put him face to face with working people, their lives, their struggles, and it let him really start testing and refining his ideas about education, finding ways that worked both, inside and outside of regular schools.
And you really can't separate Freire from the Brazil of his time, can you? Especially that mid-20th century period. What was going on?
It was a really tough time. Brazil was still dealing with the fallout from the 1929 economic crisis. There was intense poverty, especially in rural areas, and the sources we looked at really emphasized the plight of the campesinos, the rural workers.
Right, you couldn't vote, right? Because they were illiterate.
Exactly. Illiteracy was a huge political barrier. The sources described Brazil then as trying to transition, but still fundamentally a closed society. Democracy was very limited. And on top of that, there was this history of strong cultural influence from outside the country. Freire felt this kind of contributed to this idea that if you were poor and uneducated, you were just sort of naturally meant to be oppressed.
And that link, illiteracy, poverty, powerlessness, that became the engine for his whole approach to education, didn't it?
Absolutely. He saw education, a different kind of education, as the key. It wasn't just an academic exercise for him. It was an urgent response to the reality he saw.
But pushing for that kind of change wasn't easy. The 1964 military coup happened.
Right. And his methods, his literacy campaigns, were seen as subversive by the new regime, too dangerous. And that led to his arrest and then exile.
And he spent years outside Brazil, Chile, working with UNESCO, even Harvard.
He did. It was obviously a difficult time personally, but it also gave him an international platform. His ideas spread, but his heart, his focus, always seemed to be on Brazil. He came back in 1980.
And he said something fascinating then about needing to relearn his country.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It says so much about his humility, his belief in listening, in learning from the people, not just telling them things.
Not coming back as the expert with all the answers.
Exactly. And when he returned, his big push was for public quality education for everyone. He became hugely influential internationally later on, and even served as Secretary of Education for São Paulo near the end of the 80s.
Now, he was clearly a unique thinker, but our sources mention he built on earlier ideas too. People like John Dewey, Freire Gordia.
That's right. He wasn't working in a vacuum. Dewey, the American progressive educator, saw education as crucial for society, the sort of mother experience. And Freire Gordia, who founded the Modern School in Barcelona, he was big in the anti-authoritarian education movement, emphasizing freedom, justice, active learning.
So Freire fits into that tradition, but takes it somewhere really specific, directly challenging oppression. Which brings us to his famous critique of what he called banking education.
Yes, this is absolutely central to understanding Freire. He looked at traditional teaching and used this metaphor of a bank.
Of a bank, how does that work?
Well, he said the teacher acts like the subject, the one who knows everything. The student, the educando, is treated like a passive object, an empty bank account.
Okay.
And the teacher makes deposits of information, of knowledge, into the student's empty mind.
So knowledge is just stuff being transferred, like cash.
Pretty much. And Freire argued this isn't real learning. The outcome isn't empowerment. It's what he called a kind of ignorance. Not necessarily lacking facts, but lacking the ability to think critically, to act. It makes learners into passive receptacles.
And why did he see that as so bad? Not just ineffective, but actually oppressive.
Because it dehumanizes people. It treats them like things to be filled up, not active creators of knowledge. It reinforces this idea that only the teacher has valid knowledge.
Right, silencing the learner's own experience and perspective.
Exactly. It stops them from developing critical awareness about their own lives, their own reality, and the systems that might be holding them down. It basically props up the status quo. It maintains the existing power structure.
Wow. Okay, so it's more than just bad teaching. It's a tool for social control. So if that's the problem banking education, what did he propose instead, this liberatory or problematizing education?
This is his alternative vision. It flips the whole model. Instead of deposits, it's built on genuine dialogue between the educator and the learner.
Dialogue. So talking with each other, not at each other.
Precisely. The sources really stress this. Through mutual dialogue, they educate each other and construct knowledge together.
They construct it. So knowledge isn't just out there waiting to be delivered.
Nope. It's something actively built, explored, questioned, reflected upon together. And the whole point of this process, this mutual learning, it's liberation. It's about learners gaining the power to understand their world critically and then act to change it.
And this whole process, this critical understanding, leads to what Freire called conscientization, which the sources say is essential for real literacy. What exactly is that? Conscientization.
It's basically developing critical consciousness. It means moving beyond just seeing the surface of things to really understanding the social, political, economic forces at play, seeing the contradictions, and crucially taking action against the oppressive parts of that reality. It's understanding why the world is the way it is and where you fit into that picture.
So, okay, literacy isn't just sounding out words. It's using language as a tool to read the world critically.
You got it. The source material is emphatic on this. Literacy without that drive for critical awareness, for conscientization, is false or incorrect. It might teach you skills, sure, but it doesn't give you the tools for real freedom.
So how do you make that happen? He identified some conditions, right? 3 essential things for this liberatory education.
Yes, 3 indispensable conditions. First, dialogue and criteria.
Yeah.
You absolutely need that environment of respect where real conversation, real questioning is not just allowed, it's fundamental.
Okay, that sounds worlds away from just listening to a lecture.
Totally. Second condition, modification of educational program content. The stuff you learn has to come from the learner's own lives, their reality, their problems, their context, not abstract stuff dropped in from outside.
Make it real, make it relevant. Got it. And the third?
Third, utilizing new techniques for codifying and decodifying content. This is where the method gets practical. Finding ways to represent parts of their reality that's codifying and then breaking them down, analyzing them, decodifying in ways that spark that critical discussion.
Okay, and that brings us right to the Freire method itself. How did he actually do this problematizing literacy?
Right. So his method generally has 2 big stages. The first is the initial literacy process, the alphabetization problematizadora, and the second is what comes after post-alphabetization. Let's dig into that first stage, which has 5 phases.
Okay, phase 1, lay it out.
Phase 1 is about discovering the learner's vocabulary universe. This means that educators actually spend time with the community, talking, listening, finding out which words hold real weight for them, words tied to their daily lives, their work, their emotions, their existence.
So not words from a standard textbook, but words like, if they're bricklayers, maybe brick, or farmers, land, plant.
Exactly. The sources give examples like ladrillo, brick, radio, escuela, school, plantation, tierra, land, plantar, to plant, producto, product. These are their words. They come loaded with meaning and experience, sometimes struggle.
That makes so much sense. Start with what matters to them. Gives it immediate purpose. Okay, phase 2.
Phase 2 is selection of words. From that universe of words they discovered, they choose specific ones called generator words.
Generator words.
Yeah, because they generate discussion and new words. They're chosen carefully based on things like syllabic richness, how many parts they have, phonetic difficulty, so you build complexity gradually, and crucially, their practical content. How relevant are they to the group's actual lives?
Okay, choose powerful words that are good for learning language and sparking thought. Phase 3.
Phase 3 is the creation of typical situations. This is key. They don't just present the word brick. They use these generator words within visuals, maybe a drawing, a photo, or just a description showing a situation from the learner's own reality. This is where the problematizing, the critical dialogue really ignites.
You mean like that example in the source about Tejado, the roof?
Exactly that. You show a picture of a roof, maybe a simple house with the word tejado, but the conversation isn't just, that's a roof. It becomes, who built it? Is it a good roof? Does everyone here have a proper roof? Why not? What's it made of? Where did those materials come from? What does having a roof mean for safety, for dignity, for ownership?
Ah, I see. So the word Tejado isn't just about spelling. It's a doorway to talking about housing, maybe inequality, labor, resources, the real issues.
Precisely. It leverages the familiar to analyze the bigger picture, local, regional, even national problems, all starting from their context. That's driving the conscientization. Okay, phase 4 is the indicator cards.
These are the ones that break the word down.
Yeah. For each generator word, they'd have cards showing it split into syllables, like tejado. These help the learners, guided by the coordinator, that's what Freire often called the educator, see the building blocks of the word, starting to decode.
Right. See the word, see the parts. Makes sense. And the last phase, phase 5.
Phase 5 is elaboration of phonetic families. Now, they take those syllables they've identified, like te from tejado, and explore the whole family, ta, ti, ti, do, tu. Then the next syllable, j, a, ja, 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 jo, ja, and dio, da, de, di, da, tu.
Okay.
By mastering these syllable families, isolating the vowel sounds, they learn how the sounds combine. And then, the really powerful part, they can start putting these known syllables together in new ways to form new words. Words they might not have even seen before, but they now have the tools to construct and decode them.
That is brilliant. They're not just memorizing words someone else decided they should know. They're learning the system, gaining the power to generate language themselves, to read and write about their world using their vocabulary.
It's incredibly empowering. It gives them not just the skill, but the confidence, the ability to engage critically, to express themselves. And that problematizing aspect is woven through the whole thing. Learning is always connected to questioning reality.
So what happens after they achieve this initial literacy, that second stage, post-alphabetization?
The sources talk about a really deep change here. The people who've gone through this process, the now alphabetizados, they're transformed. They stop seeing themselves as just passive objects being acted upon.
They start seeing themselves as subjects, as agents.
Exactly. They begin to act as subjects of their own history, their own destiny. They have the linguistic tools, yes, but also the critical awareness to participate more fully, to challenge things, to work together to change their situation. It's a fundamental shift in perspective and power.
It sounds incredibly effective. Was there one example that really stood out, showing how well it worked?
Yes, there's a really striking example from 1962 back in northeast Brazil. This was an area, remember, with just massive illiteracy. The source mentioned something like 15 million illiterate people out of 25 million. Just huge numbers.
15 million, wow.
Yeah, an immense scale. And in Angicos, Rio Grande do Norte, using Freire's method, a group of 300 campesinos learned to read and write in just 45 days.
45 days. That's
Exactly.
unbelievably fast compared to how long literacy usually takes.
It really is. It speaks volumes about the power of tapping into people's own reality, their motivation, connecting learning directly to their lives, and this idea of empowerment, of consciousness. It was a huge proof of concept.
And of course, his ideas spread far beyond Brazil, especially through his books. The most famous ones were written while he was in exile.
That's right. Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which came out around 1970, and Education as the Practice of Freedom from 1971. These became global touchstones.
What was the main focus of each?
Pedagogy of the Oppressed is probably his most famous. It really lays out the philosophical foundation for a pedagogy by and for those who are oppressed. It argues for their liberation through this cycle of reflection and action on their world, what he called praxis, which grows out of conscientization.
And the other one, Education as the Practice of Freedom.
That book gathered ideas he'd developed thinking about Brazil's own transition. It offered a vision for how education could help build a more free, critical, and independent society as the country was changing.
Right, so let's try and pull this together. Freire gives us this really sharp critique of traditional banking education, says it's oppressive. Then he offers this alternative, liberatory education, based on dialogue, building knowledge together.
Aimed at conscientization, that critical awareness.
Right. And he provides this practical step-by-step method to actually do it, rooted in the learner's own lives, their own words.
Fundamentally, his argument is that education is never neutral. It's never just technical. It either functions to keep things as they are, to keep people passive, or it can be, as he put it, a practice of freedom, empowering people to understand their world and change it.
It makes you think, how do these ideas land today? When you think about dialogue, critical thinking, education for empowerment, how does that resonate in the world you see around you now? How might we use these ideas in our own learning, maybe even just in how we try to understand the news or social media?
Yeah, it definitely challenges you to think about the purpose of information. Are we just consuming it, or are we engaging with it critically, trying to understand the why behind it?
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. If Freire is right, if authentic literacy truly requires conscientization, that deep, critical understanding of your context, what does that mean for us today? In this world saturated with information, endless feeds, constant updates, what does it really mean to be well-informed? Is just having access to facts enough?
Or do we need something more? That ability Freire talked about to critically read the world behind the data, behind the headlines, something to think about.